Senator Wu.
Yes, thank you to our witnesses. I'd like to build on Senator Coyle's question, and it draws on two recent books, one by a group of Canadianists called Rethinking Canadian Identity from Abroad, something like that, to Professor Nimajin and Professor Kirk, all Canadian studies professors abroad. The other book, Canadian Foreign Policy in Transition, sort of a reflection on the state of the study of Canadian foreign policy. And the theme that I picked up in that book is that being a Canadianist is painful and not particularly rewarding for an academic career. Boxing, if I can put it that way, boxing yourself as a Canadian is focusing on Canadian foreign policy, teaching Canadian political theory or Canadian political issues in a political science department often is something that you're penalized for doing for a variety of petty academic reasons, perhaps. I don't know. I'm not an academic. But that raises the question of the strategic way of developing a modernized Canadian studies program. Would it be better, or could we consider, instead of creating a box called Canadian Studies, thinking about injecting Canadian perspectives into the so-called mainstream disciplines so that there's a Canadian angle always in economics and history and political science and sociology and so on and so forth, so that there's also the international and the traditional scholarly and academic recognition that comes with being on topic, if you know what I mean. Perhaps Professor English would like to respond first, and then all three of you, please.
Sure.
Within 2 minutes, please.
Okay. Canadian Foreign Policy in Transition is a book of which I was the co-editor and of the series, not the book itself. I could tell you one of the problems that you pointed to correctly. The book is published by UBC Press, as you probably know, and I just asked them for the sales of the series. And one of the problems for Canadian publishing is that characteristically, a book like that sells 300 to 500 copies. If you publish with Oxford University Press, Cambridge University Press, or one of the American ones, the books will sell 1,500 to 2,000 copies. I've published with Canadian publishers and non-Canadian publishers, and the quality in terms of editing, qualities of the books themselves, I think in most cases are higher than the foreign counterparts. But we haven't managed to handle that particular question. It's a very particular one, but it's part of a larger question. How do we get Canada known? And it's very disappointing when you consider the amount of effort that goes into these books, and you'll notice how much they cost. The reason they cost so much is the number is not high in terms of sales, and they're all subsidized. That's a subsidized series, partly from a grant from the C.D. Howe Foundation, and partly by the government through Aid to Scholarly Publishing.
Professor Béland, in about 40 seconds, if you can.
Yes, Senator Wu, I agree with you. We should not just study. We should not just promote the study of Canada within Canadian studies in narrow sense of the term. I think that we need to, that's why I mentioned policy schools, but I could also have mentioned political science, economics, history, and so forth. We need to understand that a comparative angle on Canada is very important. When I started my career, there was one of my a prof at the time. I was a PhD student, John Miles from who's now the University of Toronto, Professor Emeritus. He told me, if you want people abroad to care about Canada, you have to adopt a comparative perspective and explain them why studying Canada is important in a global, broader perspective. And I think that's what we should do when we renew understanding Canada, because understanding Canada is also understanding the world.
Thank you very much.